I see some new names. This is beautiful. Very happy to see that. So with that said, if someone would like to begin the meeting with a question or a comment, I would appreciate that.
Robert, can you hear me?
Hear you perfectly, Sterling.
This is Carl speaking.
Oh, excuse me, Carl.
But I'm very happy to be here from Central Arizona. And I heard you first on the BATCAP interview. And you touched me very deeply right away, and especially since you had a Gurdjieff background. And I felt I knew you because you reminded me of a lot of the Gurdjieff people. I grew up in the Gurdjieff teaching, the work in New York. And later, Mrs. March was my teacher. And so I was very touched when you read a poem of hers online, one of your interviews, other interviews on Facebook, I think. And you don't hear too much from her. So my question was to you is about the work and how it squares with your present views and being. Because I have listened to your BATCAP interview 3 times. I have listened to the Zooms, and I have bought your book, which I've just started reading, but there seemed to be some discrepancy there that I want to ask about. And part of that has to do with whether there is work to do or isn't work to do. And whether or not we have beliefs that lead us, as in Gurdjieff, in the idea of man's possible evolution and the striving that one must do for that, which has imbued me with my self-motivation throughout my life. And I don't know that I'm ready to give up those beliefs. I find them useful even though I see them as beliefs and have long seen beliefs as only tools and not necessarily truths. But nevertheless, I wanted to know what your take was on all of this.
Okay, thank you. Welcome, Carl. It's very good to have you here. It's a great question. It's actually several questions. My involvement with Gurdjieff, I was never part of a group, and I was never in the work in that sense of being part of a group. My mentor, Walter Chappell, was a student of Willem Nyland, who was a very close friend and student of Gurdjieff's. So that when Walter and I discussed these matters, we would discuss them in terms of his Gurdjieffian background, because he'd been through all that work, a lot of it. He, of course, knew Louise March very well, et cetera. So Walter Chappell spoke in Gurdjieffian terms because that was his terms of art, in the same way that I like Zen Buddhism as a lingo. But that doesn't mean that I believe in any of it. I don't believe in any of it. Because beliefs are verbal. They're words. And as we know, going back to Lao Tzu and even earlier, what we really are cannot be put into words. So if we use words, we are courting danger. And the danger is what you call reification, which means just because you can name something, you think you know what it is, or you think that it exists. The primary reification is the word God. It's just a word. Except when you say that word, almost everyone creates some kind of picture or some kind of feeling. And when you do that, you are confusing yourself, because the truth is you know nothing about God. You know nothing about God. You don't know if such a thing exists, or if it exists, of what it's comprised, what it does, what powers it has or hasn't. All of this is fictional in the human mind. And that's why it's important to get beyond words. It's really important. It's vitally important. we're using words here. I'm using words because that's all I've got at the moment. But we must try to understand that our beliefs are a form of self-hypnotism. And if we repeat them and keep repeating them, we're actually hypnotizing ourselves. When we express our beliefs to others, we may feel that we're expressing those beliefs so that they will hear them, but that's not true. We're expressing those beliefs so that we will hear them. That is how we continue this hypnotic trance. If I'm a churchgoer, I have to go to church all the time to get that fix. Everyone is going to be talking about God, and I will talk about God, and pretty soon God is real. And then people who believe that way will see someone like me and say, how can you doubt that? It's so real to me. Well, I'm someone who has induced hypnotic trances as part of my work in psychotherapy. So I know very well that something can feel totally real and just be a thought form. It's really important to remember this if we're going to do this. So now you, Carl, asked me about the work. This is the work. We're doing it right now. At least I'm doing mine. Whether you are doing yours or not depends on the level of your participation in this and your interest in it. So you might ask, Carl, well, how can you say you're doing the work and also say there's nothing to do or nothing to seek or nothing to strive for? It's really very simple, and it has nothing to do with what I think or don't think. This is a very simple matter. I'm not an authority in your life. So if you feel that you have some work to do or some destination to pursue, you would be very foolish to avoid doing that just because Robert says something about it. I've got my account. I've got to deal with my own problems, not yours. I can speak from this perspective, which I think people are finding valuable. I know they are because I get letters now every day about my book. On the other hand, just because I wrote a book that's interesting to certain people does not mean that I know everything about these matters. The fact is I don't. I do not. So just as I listened to people in my life who were influential without being completely convinced by what they said, Alan Watts is an example, J. Krishnamurti is another influence who I don't find completely convincing. It's important to regard anything that I may say with the same grain of salt, the same kind of natural skepticism. And if we do that, Carl, I believe that we will arrive at one's own program, one's own center. Whatever that is, I have no idea what it is. I really don't. I don't even know what mine is. So I certainly can't advise you about yours. This is something that we discover moment by moment as we live. And it deepens if we care about it. So I think where I do intersect with Louise March or Gurdjieff or Wilhelm Nyland or Walter Chappell, where we do coincide is on this matter of open-heartedness, which is the only way that you can ever do any work that's worth a damn. You have to open your heart to it. If you start down a certain path and it doesn't pan out, that's fine. You're still here, still alive, and you'll find a new pathway. My personal confession, which I used to have a great deal of difficulty saying out loud, but I'll say it now, is that I don't have that agenda. I had that agenda, but I do not have that agenda in present time. It's completely missing. What I'm doing here, going on and on verbally, is kind of a rant at this point, or a rap anyway, is expressing myself. And I don't expect that I will be any better at this tomorrow than I am now, or that I will understand myself any better tomorrow than I do now. This is all I've got. This is utterly all I've got. And what I have to share is that I see all of us in the same condition. So whereas someone may come to me and say, how do you awaken, Robert? To me, the question is really strange because I'm looking at an awake person asking me that question, which is what I mean by riding a donkey, searching for a donkey. It's very simple. You're already there. Why do you need to stick a second head on top of the one you've already got? See, this is very simple. You can just be yourself in this moment, live that out for whatever it's worth. And I say that whatever you need to know or feel will be apparent at the right time. What else is there, after all, but this dance? Okay, I've spoken. Carl, I hope that replied properly to your question. If you have something else to add or question, please do that now. And if you don't, then we'll turn it over to the next victim.
Thank you very much, Robert. I'm very happy to know you and to be here among this august group.
That's great, Carl. Thank you very much. All right, anyone else want to comment or question? I see some old friends here. I see John Troy. John, it's so great to see you. I've got to express that. What a joy. This is so fun that we get to do this. There's some other people without their videos on, so I don't see them, but we got a bunch of people here. So who would like to speak? Okay.
Can you hear me?
I do hear you.
Okay.
Is your name Burma?
Yes, it is.
I see you and hear you, Burma. You've got the floor. Go ahead.
Fantastic. First, I want to comment on your comment today that I read about the shooting in Florida, that someone asked a question and you answered it so clearly. My question is, can you speak about your experience with choice and free will and what your understandings are about that?
Okay. Going back to the comment on the school shooting, since I have no agenda, everything that's happening is entirely clear to me. I'm not seeing it with any great bias. I don't have this political agenda that seems to burden everyone. It's not that I don't have my feelings about politics, but I understand that they can't define the human race. I mean, there's a lot of us here with different attitudes. So I just comment on that school shooting from a rather non-judgmental, objective viewpoint. So, and people perceive that as clarity, and I guess in a way it is. As far as free will is concerned, the way I understand it is it's like this. We do have the capacity as people to section off a very small part of the universe and through a kind of play acting, believe that we have control in that space. But in order to do that, we have to ignore a lot. We have to tell ourselves lies in order to create this free will space. It may be necessary to do that, but then you will get this kind of situation that I hear about quite often where someone will say, I was in AA for 5 years because I had to quit drinking. But after a while, I began to see that that was also a box. It wasn't the drinking box, it was a different kind of box. And now I'm in that box. And that's free will. It may seem free, but what you have really done is create a sense of responsibility, guilt, and shame where those things don't really fit. Your feelings are not chosen. This is clear. If it's not clear, you need to try to notice your feelings as they arise and ask yourself if you just created that. Suppose I'm a compulsive masturbator and I tell myself, this this is horrible. I've really got to stop this. It really doesn't fit the rest of my life. I'm ashamed of it. It feels terrible. Okay, maybe I can make a space of so-called free will where I say, on the days I masturbate, I can't have the scotch and soda at 5 o'clock. And then my free will be that I have to choose between the drink that I really love or these self-induced orgasms. And then now that's free will. You create the circumstances, and then you say, well, I'll pick this one over here. But it's all your mind. And what my take on my own free will is it doesn't exist. And all of this mind is just arising. I don't know what I'm going to say next. I'm not responsible for it. And so I feel no guilt and shame. And I also don't feel any pride. Gonzalo, turn off your mic, please. I also don't feel any pride. So the price that you pay for being awake in this sense is that you're really not proud of yourself. And what you gain is you're really not ashamed of yourself. You're just another human doing the same thing that humans have done forever. You have your likes and dislikes. I'm heterosexual, for example. But if I were gay, I would not be blaming myself for it at this point, understanding what I understand. I would just say, hey, that's the way it is. I didn't ask for it. I didn't ask for this brain that I have. It's in the condition that it's in. It's had some concussions. I've had some high fevers, so it's probably not as good as it once was. But it was good, and I got it. I had a nice face too. So these are advantages, but we don't choose them. And this is important to understand because I have dark sides and downsides, which I also did not choose, and I'm not responsible for them. And as soon as I see that, they're not so dark anymore. They're just what is. They're just what is. I don't know, Burma, if that addressed your question.
Oh no, that's pretty much where I'm coming from as well. Except I hear a lot of people anchor on to beliefs. They think they get to choose their beliefs, and then they get to blame people when people don't do what they think their beliefs line up with. And so if people aren't choosing, then they're just doing what they're doing. And there's no judgment.
Yes.
That's how I see it.
Yeah, well, what I'm feeling from what you're saying is that this is quite personal, and there's some specific human in your life who directs these kinds of judgments at you. Is that a fact?
Well, I have, in the story world, I've been on this spiritual journeying for many decades, over 50 years. So it's been a long schlep anyway. So, you know, I'm just reaching the point where it's like, it is what it is. And people aren't choosing, the people who do bad things aren't choosing to do bad things, and people who do good things aren't choosing to do good things. There's just so much playing out in the world of cause and effect and genetics and DNA, and I don't know, you can just name a zillion things that influence my breath in this moment. So I'm not choosing it. I'm not choosing the words that are coming out of my mouth. I'm not choosing the thoughts that go through my head. But I have dealt with such a tsunami of looking and searching and people having answers that I just wanted to discuss this with you because I find you so refreshing and clear.
Oh, well, thank you. I don't have any answers, and I guess that's a relief.
It is.
Yes, because you see, if I have the answers, where does that put you? And
right.
then this hierarchy But the hierarchy is completely false. I mean, you are living your life. I don't know anything about that. How could I?
Right.
I know nothing about it. So, and this is, you know, people, I get these messages all the time. Why don't you like Adyashanti or whoever it is? The guy's fine. I have nothing against him. He seems like a sweet guy, and I imagine that he's helping in a way that to him seems helpful. The thing is that for one person to sit on a stage and say, I'm up here and I'm going to teach you how to be that way, I'm sorry to say this, it feels, from my perspective, narcissistic. It's not clean. It's not really clean. I think the people who help most, that I've been helped by most, is people who are human and don't put themselves above you. They realize that the same fears and anxieties you have, they have them, just in a different format or a different poetry or a different, we've all been hurt.
Right.
That's what I'm trying to say. We've all been hurt. And that's what we're trying to get over. And if we use spirituality as the medicine, we're messing with some very dangerous shit. I really don't think that's the way. I do not think so. I think self-knowledge is the way. Not having someone tell you who you are one with the universe or some other grandiose concoction. I think what we really need is self-knowledge, self-observation. We have to see where it hurts, not deny that there's pain. We have to see what our habitual behaviors are like. And when we see their habitual behavior, that's when it starts to change, not by willpower, not by willpower. Let's say I have a chocolate addiction and I'm always sticking chocolate in my face. I see people doing this. Okay, it's fine, you know. So, but now one of these people says, well, I really got to get over this addiction. How do I do it? The way that you do it is to become conscious when you're eating the chocolate. It's pretty simple. That's all you can do. That's all any of us can do. And so just to flash back to Adyashanti, because I get this question, you know, 5 days a week or something. A lot of people really react to my having said in interviews that the spiritual marketplace is kind of a scam. It's a place for, okay, I don't think Adyashanti is really a scamster, although he must be a millionaire many times over at this point. But I don't think that's why he did it. I believe him. I just don't think it's helpful to have realized beings running around. I really think we don't need them.
But to my point, he's not choosing it, is he?
Say that again, I'm sorry, I didn't.
To the point of no choice, Adyashanti isn't choosing to do what he does.
No, he's not. None of us is choosing to do what we do, but we're all influenced. So suppose someone at this meeting has been a devotee of Adyashanti. It's very possible. And then they hear Robert talking this way. That becomes a kind of an influence. And this is, we influence one another.
Yeah.
So although I didn't choose this agenda, what's occurred in my life is that I just always tell the truth as best I see it. I've given up this need to dissemble or make myself seem better or worse than I am. It's over. I've done all that. Mm-hmm. And I'm saying that from that perspective, I like to call people like Adyashanti into question, not personally, but the process. The medium is the message. See, I like to, so the medium of someone sitting on a stage surrounded by flowers, to me, is a pretty bad message. Let's all have a flower if that's what we're going to do. Sit in a circle and everybody gets a flower. That's how it. Now, I understand it's not entirely possible. I wrote this book, here I am holding forth and all that. I'm sorry. But I think it's worth it because I want to clarify these ideas. I want people to be able to ask, what did you mean by that? Or how do you see this or that? Because now, having written the book and the book is circulating out in the world, I don't think I'm writing another book. So this is a way of clarifying those ideas. Otherwise, I really would not indulge in this kind of thing, and we'd just all be sitting in a circle with a flower. I want to say hello to Julio. Hi, good to see you.
I have a question.
Okay, someone just jumped in there.
Sorry. But I get in, I have to leave at 11. Is it working?
Yes, it's working.
Okay. I want to, well, first of all, you look wonderful. Looks like you're feeling better. Yes?
Yeah, I'm coming back. I was really very ill for a while, but
Yeah, it sounded like it.
the old boy seems to have another day coming to him so far.
Color in your face again. I was going to continue on the whole Adya thing. I've been spending recently time with friends who are devout Christians and speak in that language. And I had an interesting insight sitting with them last night. They're beautiful, beautiful people, and want the same thing as everybody. And it struck me that this very complex mental structure that the religion that they work through seems like a lot of work, but it's for the same end, it seems to me. And I think of people like Adyashanti and yourself even. If there's no one individual, it's just the speaking of what is and floating, you know, from, because I was a fan of Adya for a while, and in fact it was funny when I first read your stuff. I thought, oh, here's a grumpy guy, he doesn't like anybody. But then I just kept reading and listening and opened my eyes to, kind of broke down some of these beliefs I'd been operating under, thinking, not realizing they were beliefs. But my question to you, I wanted to ask you about the role of silence. You know, there are a lot of people talk about silence and the importance of silence, and I want to know what is silence. I'm curious what your experience of silence is, if that's even something that is in your vernacular. I wonder, I sometimes wonder if it's I think we read these things sometimes or hear from people and we think it's a prescriptive thing, that we need to do silence to get somewhere, but perhaps it's actually descriptive of what happens after what. But so I'm kind of curious about your take on silence, and what does that mean, and what importance is that? And for someone like myself who feels this going into floating in and out of that and this, you know, at times no this, just that, or, you know, no me, but all. And other times there's a lot of chitter chatter. And so I've been watching this, wondering, is this what silence means, when it's gone or not? Or anyway, that's my question.
Okay, that's a really good question. There's not really a this and a that. There's just this.
Mm.
And we divide it this way
Mm-hmm.
because we're afraid. You mentioned Christian people you've been hanging out with, and you say they're wonderful people. I don't know what that means. What makes them wonderful? That they believe that everything they do is being judged, and so they can't fuck up.
No, they're just.
They do, they'll end up in hell. So they treat everybody really. Oh, I just love you. Is that wonderful, or isn't it?
I just see them as searching like all of us, and their search has gone through the religious way, but I don't see them as much different from myself, although definitely using different language and caught in a perhaps different. Not that I'm not caught in something too, but this big conceptual structure, but yearning in the same way and feeling in the same way. And
Yes, but we're all yearning perhaps, but we're not
Yeah.
all yearning for the same thing. And
Mm.
it's a mistake to believe that everyone has this basic need and that we just have various ways of trying to access it. That is not really how I see it
Really?
at all. Each one of us when we are born, we are not born tabula rasa in the same way that I have a certain face, certain eye color, all the rest of it.
Mm.
I also have a personality on the day that I'm born. This isn't something that mommy and daddy create. It's there. You have a confident infant and an anxiety-ridden infant before there's any external input. Now, the external inputs eventually do channel the personality in one way or another. If you have this anxiety-ridden child with skillful parenting, that child may become a somewhat confident adult. That's possible. Or you could take a child who's born confident and undermine that confidence with poor parenting. But the basic personality is there.
Mm.
I'm not saying this. This has been borne out by countless studies. Really, nobody believes in the tabula rasa idea that was so popular in the 1980s, 70s, 80s,
Mhm.
and influenced so much child rearing, unfortunately.
Mm.
So I'm at this point now where what I'm trying to say is, I want things that these Christian people do not want. Seems clear. I don't really want them anymore, but I wanted them. I didn't want to go to heaven, for example. No interest in it, zero.
Mhm.
I want to be here now, and that's why I am here now.
Right.
Now, if we generalize what I'm saying, and imagine that everybody's just eventually going to be enlightened, or whatever you call it, we do ourselves a tremendous injustice. Because when I heard your question, I did not hear the kind of question that a Christian would ask. Not a devout Christian would ask. Not at all. A devout Christian wouldn't have such a question. God's taking care of everything. He's got his plan, and I just have to conform to it. And then all the anxiety is taken out of life.
Right.
It's all okay, because it'll all come out in the wash. Well, what I'm saying is there is no wash. This is it.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Does that make sense to you? I don't know.
No, it does. I guess my thinking was that kind of if I were to translate the whole heaven hell thing, it's not about later, it's about now. Does that ring true? Kingdom of heaven here on earth.
Well,
I'm not a Christian, by the way. I'm just.
I understood that you weren't. That's what. But does that ring true?
The
Yes.
concept of heaven and hell, that it's really about what right here and now that are, the wakeness or not awakeness.
So no afterlife?
No.
Well, so then you're not a Christian.
No, I'm not.
But you see, that's what we're discussing here. Because to a Christian, what we're doing here now is only really important because we're being scored on it. Given a grade. Constantly given a grade. And if that grade comes out to be a passing grade, then I get to spend eternity with Jesus. And if that turns out to be a failing grade, I am going to have hot lava poured in my ears, or whatever they do in hell.
My experience with different Christians, and not that I hang out with a lot, is that it's a continuum, that they don't all sit in the camp of the afterlife. There are those who are asking good questions and starting to
Yes.
at
Of,
one point.
of course. I'm painting with a very broad brush here. I mean, Thomas Merton, for example, was a Christian mystic, and I think he and I probably agree on 90% of this stuff, not the Christian part. But of course, there are people of sophisticated understanding who can practice religions and get what they get from it and see it symbolically and not take it so literally. That there are people like that. But and there may be some people like that here in this group. I don't know everyone intimately. But I'm speaking in general.
Yeah.
And what I'm saying is the people who tend to be religious are people who want certainty.
Right.
They want God to already have spoken. This is the word of God. It's already been spoken. It's
Isn't
a
that
fact.
the-
There's no doubt about this. There is no doubt. No doubt.
Can't the same be said for those who go to the big Adyashanti things?
Precisely. And that's my point.
Right.
What they've done, they have already had the Christian indoctrination, and they couldn't handle that one. So now they found some exotic theory to follow, which, and I'm not saying that the theory is wrong, but if you replace Jesus with non-duality, but you have the same attitude towards it, it's the same thing. Nothing has changed. There's been no psychologically, you're in exactly the place that you were before. It's like being in love with one person, then falling out of love and falling in love with someone else and repeating the same pattern. So yes, so if your attitude toward metaphysics is that you're on your knees, it really doesn't matter who you've got on the pedestal. It could be Jesus, it could be Adyashanti, or it could just be a concept like non-duality. And it's all the same thing.
Right.
And what we need to do is get off our knees, realize that there's no one who knows you the way you know you. There is no one in this world who knows you the way you know you. I'm going to repeat that. There is no one on this planet who can live your life for you. No one, ever. And as soon as we understand that, Adyashanti just fades away. I don't actually give a rat fuck for what Adyashanti thinks about anything. It's completely irrelevant to me. I don't care. If it works for him, great. I'm not calling him any names. He's just another citizen. And the fact that he's on this stage and there's all these hypnotized people sitting at his feet, to me, is just bizarre. It's as bizarre as Christianity, which I find entirely bizarre. It's insane, really, if you think about it. This guy died, but not really, and he was born to a mom who'd never had sex and all the rest of it. It just, why would anyone burden the mind with such fantasies and then pretend that they might be relevant or maybe on some symbolic level they resonate? To me, I've just got to tell you, it's all a bunch of shit.
Yeah. I hear that.
All of it.
Yeah.
I put it out of my mind entirely. And when I did, or that happened to me, not that I put it out, when that left my mind and I found myself awake and not hypnotized by human history, this was a completely different world. And that is what I tried to share in the 10,000 Things. And that's what I'm trying to clarify here. And this is better here because I can say shit and fuck and all that, and it's acceptable. I'm sorry, I'm having too much fun.
No, fine.
You still have a question, right?
Well, I was wondering about the whole silence thing, but no.
What's the question about the violence thing?
Oh, silence.
Oh, silence. Yes, I forgot about that.
Silence.
Silence. Yes. I wouldn't make a God out of it.
Yeah.
If you experience any, God, you're lucky.
Mm.
when it happens to me, I just feel so, I'm going to talk out of school here. I feel blessed. Don't you see these things just come and go? If you're worried about something, there's not going to be any silence until you stop worrying about it. And you
Okay.
make yourself stop,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah. I see that.
So all we can do is ride the waves.
Yeah.
See, that's why I say I don't have any answers. I'm just riding the waves like anyone else. That's just all you can do. And sometimes I was really ill a couple of weeks ago. I've got some medical problems, and being ill is difficult. And it felt terrible. But now I feel okay. So this is what we got. This is all we ever have. And that's if I have one message for all of you beautiful people, that is it. This is what we have right now. And there isn't any future, and there isn't any heaven, and there isn't any Jesus. Those are all just rumors. And meanwhile, you are here. I see someone raise a hand. David.
Yes, how's the audio now?
It's a little better.
Okay. So anyway, what I was saying is that this aliveness, I like that phrase, this aliveness, and I've been meditating for over 40 years, and for most of that time, I had this thought pretty strongly in my head that your book knocked out of my head, fortunately, and that thought was, maybe it'll be another 40 years, but one of these days I'll have this, all anxiety will go away, and it'll be just happiness and no sadness. And then I realized that that's not true. And so this aliveness is like, as one of your main things you're talking about is, this is it. And there's going to be one moment there'll be unhappiness or anxiety. The next moment there'll be happiness, and this is it. So.
Okay. There's no question in that, right?
No, just that's kind of one of the main things I've gotten from you. So.
Okay. I see what you've done with my book is cut little pieces of it out and stick them on your fridge, and that's good. You could change there it is. You could change the word order, make it say something different. So when I feel anxiety, I like to chew gum or pick at my scalp. So whatever you have to do we're only human beings here. It can really be helpful to go to the zoo and look at the gorillas for a while and then try to understand. Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you, Sterling.
Okay. I just had you reminded me of when you started talking about Jesus and the Bible and so on. I remember in my own experience, my mom was a Christian and my dad was an agnostic. And when I was young, I went to a Sunday school, and I was thrown out of Sunday school because I told the Sunday school teacher that all of the people in the church seemed to be hypocrites, that they didn't really follow anything that had to do with Jesus's teachings, And then later I studied, all these religious things like you did, and including the Bible. And it seems to me that Jesus was probably an awakened person, or an enlightened person, if you want to put it that way, who was trying to help people see things, sort of like you're doing. But that he himself was not a Christian, and that he didn't believe any of this stuff that was later put on him. So that the whole idea of Christianity, this hypnotized belief structure, whether it's the Catholic or the Protestants or the evangelicals or whoever, had nothing whatsoever to do with him. And then reading through the Bible over and over again, I see these little points where he seemed that he actually probably said some of the things attributed to him, but they all seem to correspond to things like, say, Buddha or J. Krishnamurti or other people, or Gurdjieff, talk about the nature of reality. And nothing to do with this obedient structure. So I just think he was an enlightened being that was there, and then this whole structure was put upon him by people who never understood the slightest thing about what he was saying. Does this resonate at all with you?
You're asking, oh, let me turn on my video here. Marie Fishman, if you hear this, keep your mic muted. I did mute it. It's interfering with the program here. You're asking me how people get to be cult leaders, and then the cult years later is made into a religion. I think we just see that happening in present time. And then these people who were human when they were alive, but leaders of a cult, once they're dead, they get promoted to some higher status, and then people worship them instead of the ideas, which when you were a child and said this is hypocrisy, that's what you were seeing. They're worshiping the structure, and you're not hearing the message. So, but you know, I don't really know about Jesus. I mean, I know that's been very influential. I'm not too sure about it as a philosophy. I question it. I don't buy it automatically just because a lot of people think it's great. So I don't know if that answers your question, Sterling.
Yes, actually, it does, because I think well, it's pretty similar to the way that I have seen it since I was quite small. Thank you.
Yeah. I wonder if anybody else wants to weigh in on that question.
Yeah, sure. I'll take a stab at that.
You got the floor, David.
Cool. Robert recommended a book that I read, I don't know, about a year and a half ago, and it was called Beelzebub's Tales. And I read Beelzebub's Tales, and he said to me in the instructions, David, read it two ways. Read it with your intuition, basically, and read it with regular words. And so as I read it, I was it's a very interesting book. It's a hard book to read because Gurdjieff basically wrote it in a way that gets past a lot of the walls, is the way I'll put it. And in part of the book, he intermixes true factual information along with imagery. And in that imagery is still factual information. And so I'm reading it, and you know, it's a tough read. And I'm going through, I think it's like 800 or 900 pages. I think I read it in about 2 weeks or so. But all of a sudden I saw a sentence, and it mentioned a group of people named the Essenes. And I didn't know who the Essenes were, and I didn't know anything about them other than that, you know, a lot of Christians rant around. And, you know, I mean, I'll just preface it also that I'm the guy that threw a rock at the rabbi and got kicked out of Hebrew school as a kid. It was 1,000,001 shot, and I hit the rabbi on the head. Anyway, so
Good morning.
I came, good morning. I basically came out, and when I read this one sentence, I decided I would research, because I didn't think it was a real thing. I didn't think the Essenes were real. So I went and I did, of course, my usual thing, which is to do research and investigate the Essenes. And in investigating them, I also had some backgrounds in the Nag Hammadi texts that were Gnostic texts that had been translated. And I had forgotten that when I read the Nag Hammadi and the new translations that they're still deciphering, that they were actually supposedly written by the Essenes. So I started to backtrack this while I was reading the book, and I met a couple of translators and stuff. And what these translators had basically done is they'd done a chronology. And what I found out after much research was that basically the Essenes were scribes in the Sumerian civilization. The Sumerian civilization right now is the oldest civilization that we know of that had a full language and writing. They also invented what we know as time. They divided the day into 24 hours, you know, into 60 minutes, into 60 seconds. That was a concept that they're credited with at this particular point in our understanding of archaeological finds. So the Essenes were that far back of the Sumerian civilization, which means that, you know, that was very interesting to me. Then it also, in the Essene chronology, they say that Confucius was an Essene, Buddha was an Essene, Jesus was an Essene, Lao Tzu was an Essene, Muhammad was an Essene. I read the Tao Te Ching, and it's, you know, it's a beautiful piece of work. You know, it's just great. Same thing in the Essene chronology. The story of Enoch is another beautiful work that mirrors the Tao Te Ching. Same thing with the Nag Hammadi, looking at the translation from the Gnostic to the Christian. It's an interesting parallel, you know, and that's that to me was a shock and a surprise when I pulled that out of Beelzebub's Tales, because that was a culmination of a lot of things that all came together. So it was very, very interesting. I hope that I'll turn myself off.
Yeah, well, I like that story because in the spirit of it is that one never really knows what's next on the agenda. And you saw I recommended this book to you with my own intentions, or whatever you call them. I have no idea what they were. I can't remember, but you took it in the way that you took it, and you took it very far. And that's beautiful. That was your path, see, but it wasn't some pre-existing path. You have to just, in Spanish, they say vagar, which means to wander around, you know, to vagrant around, vagar. That's what you do. I mean, to make a holy quest out of it really spoils the dance. I find it's really fascinating how varied and personal all of this stuff really is. And I think we do harm to ourselves when we try to make it impersonal. It's not really impersonal. Not that you have any control over it. That's not what I mean by personal. You don't. It's personal because the next person standing right next to you, looking at the same sunset or whatever, the same Gauguin on the wall, is in a completely different world, dealing with their own anxieties, their own feelings of lack and yearning, self-blame, and all of that stuff. And that's just a human universal. So what I like about your story is that you followed a certain historical route, which I've never traveled personally. I don't know much about the Essenes, but you do. And it led you to this feeling of, I'm here now. And that's incredible. That's really beautiful. It's a self-job.
One of the takeaways that I found in your work is that there's no escape hatch for the storyline, and that it takes away the structure through reason. It takes away the structure that holds the storyline together, and it takes away all afterlife scenarios. You don't open any escape hatch whatsoever. And in the acceptance of mortality is the death rebirth, if you were to use that allegory. The acceptance, the radical acceptance of mortality is the resurrection in Jesus speak. And it does away with the storyline. There's no storyline, there's no hereafter, there's just here. and the storyline moving forward based on yesterday is a structure that falls apart and it dissolves. So questions and viewpoints from the storyline are really non-applicable. And it's tempting that we come on here and speak or do, and we'll talk about a storyline. And then that storyline is going to lead to that storyline has a blinding effect on right now. It just has a blinding effect, whether it's in the hereafter or the yesterday storyline, or I'm so great because of this or that and all that and stuff. It's just a veil. I'm done.
Yeah, thanks, John. You and I recognized that in one another when we actually met in space and time in the airport. But as soon as I saw the expression on your face, I just said, "Oh yeah, this is great. This guy gets it." So that's my reply to David about the awakening that you found in John's books. That's the same understanding that you find in my book also, that you're here now. This could be the last moment. And the thing that's so interesting is that we all know this, but it's kept at a distance.
It's almost like we're afraid to say it. We're afraid to admit it and afraid to verbalize it because it's just too fucking simple. And it doesn't make sense that it's not more complicated.
Okay, well, I was more riffing on what John was saying about mortality, which is the key to this puzzle that everyone makes out of life. And then they have to have a solution for the puzzle. So it's like a self-inflicted illness, and then you have to find a medicine for it. But all of that is just vanity. It's just a denial of mortality, aging, old age, illness, and death, as the Buddha put it. Or,
It's just fear.
or as the Buddha said, old age, illness, and death. And that was his way of sharing wisdom. And then people seem to fall into struggling with being able to accept that. But really, if you open your eyes and just don't deny what your senses see right before you, I think you'll understand pretty much everything that we can understand. The rest is just fantasy.
Hi, Robert.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
So I've been watching you. I read your book like a couple of months ago, and I was hoping for the last 2 months. I'm waiting for someone to ask my question, but I haven't met this question yet. So so I'm quite confused, and I'll probably be jumping left and right. So just have some patience with me. Can you hear me?
Yes, I
Okay.
hear you I hear you perfectly.
Okay.
Dijana,
So,
how do you say your
yeah,
name?
Diana.
Diana.
Yeah.
Diana. Is that right?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. We have all the time in the world. It's not a question of patience. We're just sitting here talking. So please continue.
So So when I started my journey, I started with spirituality because I wasn't really sure what was wrong with me. So it took a few years to discover therapy and start doing different kind of therapies. But because I started with spirituality and with meditation, both of that was going together all the time. So finally, when your interview and your book came around, I already discovered this thing because I was looking for years about, and I was wondering about the free will. And then with your interview and with your book, it just revealed to me what I already knew, that there is no free will. And it's maybe okay when you have a nice life. But there was a woman that you spoke to a few months ago on Facebook. And when you're struggling and when you're constantly in survival mode, it's kind of really hard to, I don't know, it's hard, but it's really hard to accept that there's nothing you can do. And really struck since your book. And I'm going back and forth because so I'm continuing with this therapy. So I had this abusive childhood, and I'm working with a therapist. And when I look for the way I was several years ago, and now I'm obviously better, and I'm functioning better, and I can express myself better, and I can speak up, and there's lots of things that have improved. But somehow it feels like this anxiety and this constant, when I go deep into the suffering, it seems like there's no help and there's nothing. And then this spirituality thing, knowing that there's nothing I can do, it just kind of drives me crazy. So like I'm trying to heal myself, but I don't know. I don't know how to. I don't know if you can understand what's my. It just feels. It's just constantly this craziness comes up. So I'm trying to do something, and then I remember, oh, there's nothing I can do. So that's one problem. The other one is that I don't know. Everybody just like so many things, and the search has just fallen off. And now I have problems because I have these really lovely people in my life, and most of them just seem so crazy to me because they're into their beliefs and into their stories and into their deities, and I don't know, all kinds of, I just don't know how to anymore relate to people around me. I'm just trying to keep my mouth shut and not to say anything, but I don't know if I'm crazy or they're crazy, but there's just like this huge dissonance between, I don't know how to function in life anymore. And the thing is, I wanted to ask you, because you're a therapist, what do you think about therapy? Because I heard you said something that you don't really recommend, and I don't know if I'll ever get to a point where I can actually heal this trauma and this anxiety, or just there's no point. And then also I swim into another extreme where sometimes I just behave so entitled, and I'm just finding excuse, just treating people in a bad way because, well, I'm not doing anything, so I can just do whatever. So basically, sorry, I'm not very clear.
I thought you were clear enough. I see that you're upset. I don't think the ideas in my book mean what you seem to think they mean. I don't mean that you don't participate. One has to do something. I mean, my photographs don't just magically appear on the screen. I have to get my camera, I have to go out into the world, I have to deal with all of that, spend the day out there in the streets and interact with people, etc. And then come back here, and then I can be alone and deal with photographs. So we can't really insulate ourselves from life. I think you may have misunderstood what I was trying to say to some extent. I wonder if that rings a bell. What do you think?
No, it's not that. It's that is that I noticed there is a difference when somebody knows that they're awake. And I had these experiences where I had experience where I know what you say is true, but I'm not in it all the time. And I didn't have the awakening experience when I know I'm awake. I just know what you say is true. But I go back to being my separate self and me being separate from other people. And
Okay. I got it. Now I understand.
And also another thing is that because I'm struggling in the therapy and with this anxiety and everything, then my mind just takes your story as a food, and then I just take it and I stumble down deeper into it, just using this as a story to go deeper into depression and meaninglessness, because there's nothing I can do, where actually I just need therapy. But I can't go into therapy because I know there's not, then the mind goes in, there's nothing you can do. And I'm constantly in this like craziness circle where I just, again, I can't function.
Okay, well, let me
And
try.
there's nothing I can do, and there's nothing I can't ask you because you can't help me. Nobody can, you see.
I'm not, well, wait. I can't help you because I can't do psychotherapy with you right now. This isn't the space for it. But I see that therapy would be very good for you. So that's the question you're really asking me. I think that psychotherapy is just where you need to talk about these issues. It's not about philosophy or spirituality or any of that jazz or free will. It's not about that. It's really about how you feel in this moment. And if you're not at ease with yourself, if there's just overwhelming anxiety, I think psychotherapy is very good for that. I did that for years with people, and I think I helped them. So if you can get into that kind of situation, I would encourage you to do so. And this is really your life. So to the extent that there is any free will, if there is, try to calm down. Take it step by step. And the more calm you can be, the easier it will be to deal with all of this. So let's move on. Somebody want to, before I open the floor, John, I just want to thank you again for your understanding. It's great that you're here. Really appreciate it. Okay, who wants to be next on the agenda to speak? Are you done, Burma? Have you said what you wanted to say?
Yeah, I think I have. I think I don't know what you think about this, but I have this idea that basically human beings, or whatever you want to call us, are basically just move away from discomfort as much as possible.
Is that you're asking me? Is our
Yeah, what's your take on that idea?
Moving away from discomfort?
Yeah, that's our modus operandi. That's what keeps.
Yeah. Well, there's always theories about what the prime motivating principle is. Like Freud thought it was sex, and Adler thought it was power, and they would argue about this, for example. And now you're saying it's I've forgotten what you said, but you have an idea of what's motivating us, right? But I don't think it's like that.
You don't?
No.
Oh, Okay, what do you think it's like?
I think that these thoughts about the well springs of anything are useless, is what I think. And so I don't think about them.
Oh, cool.
I
That's,
think about,
yeah.
to the extent that I'm able, I prefer to actually be centered in the here and now and just see what's on the table in front of me and do that. I really don't indulge in metaphysics. That may seem counterintuitive or something, but I have very little interest in all of that. My interest is in being, not in figuring it out.
So when
I
so
don't
your
have,
mind doesn't
excuse,
your mind doesn't take over. Your mind doesn't. You don't obsess with thoughts to
of
thinking.
course it takes over, but there's not an I apart from that. So it's like I hijack myself or something. I mean, that leads nowhere. We're not split. There isn't that split is completely artificial, I say. In my experience, there's no myself sitting back here somewhere directing the show in any way. In no way. No way. This is all just arising. It's amazing. And it's just my opinion, my point of
No,
view.
that's why I'm here, to hear your opinion.
Well, I don't, well, I've lost the thread on that, but I think I said it for whatever it's worth.
Okay. Thank you.
Comments, questions. What I'm saying is it's hard to concentrate theoretically. I'm not really up to it. I can't really do it. I have done. Know what it is. God, I wrote a doctoral dissertation.
Without the brain functioning, without certain programmed, conditioned identities, well, who am I? I don't know.
Well, that's perfect because I don't either. And I don't,
Right.
and I don't think we're going to know, see? There's not some finish line where you get to know.
No, but it was such a stark, shocking experience.
There's just not a finish line where you suddenly get to know, you see? And they draw that. It's a construct. See, they say, oh, well, now and you're given a black belt or whatever the fuck it is, and now you've arrived because someone says so. This is absurd. If you see the absurdity of it, what I'm saying, another aspect of what I'm saying, if you see the absurdity of it, it's not that you will force yourself to not be that way or not participate in it. You might participate in it, but you won't, the vanity will go out of it.
I won't take myself so seriously.
I see that I'm a clown and so are you. We're swimming in ignorance. Trying
Yes.
to.
We're all bozos on this bus and there's no bus driver.
Yeah, that's good. That's what it is. So to some people, that's really terrifying. I understand that. I don't mean to upset those people. They probably shouldn't read my book, but some of them do and they get upset. It's not my fault.
No. Well, I love your photographs because they tie in with what you say right now. We're just all humans, and you show the humanity so much in your photos, and that's so beautiful. Just being whatever we are.
Yeah, I love the camera. I really love that photographic eye. That's just great. It's a good way to see the world. I see tremendous beauty in this world, in the oddest places. Just, it's a beautiful world. And it's got a downside to it. I don't mind showing that one also. And that's what we've got. So, you were asking before about this about the school shooting issue. Were you asking me, or was someone else?
Yes, that was, yeah.
Yeah, so that's clearly on the agenda. This is going to be happening now. There's not some magic fix for it. There's all these millions of military-grade assault weapons. People have cellars full of them because when the black guy was in the White House, he might have sent out the Marines to take it all away from them or something. Conspiracy theories. And now that sane man has been discredited, and we've got this complete mental case in the White House.
Yeah.
So I'm very interested in this youth movement that's grown up around this, and I'm rooting for it 100%, of course.
Yeah.
At that age, I would have been on the Hastings myself, the Hustings, whatever they're called. In fact, I was a bit. So I'm rooting for these kids, but it's pretty hard when you have this level of fascism in the government, American government. Really hard to get those guns away from the people. But they need to be taken away, in my opinion. People have a right to be armed. I believe that's true. They should be allowed to have small arms that you use at home to protect yourself, not be wandering around with weapons that can kill 50 people in a second. I mean, that's crazy.
No, and not make teachers carry guns. Come on.
Okay, so we're all going to agree on that. I doubt there's anyone in the circle here who's one of these rabid right-wingers. If you are, stand up and identify yourself. Lock her off.
Oh my God.
Lock her off. What a trip.
I'm active in the 12-step movement, and I see a lot of drug addicts and alcoholics do the 12 steps, and they recover from their addiction. And it's a lot of, you do some writing, some inventories, you do some amend to people you harmed, and you do some meditation. But everything you do, it's like, I will do this and I will have something back in the future, you know, I will recover in the future. But I have seen a lot of people get a big change in their lives doing the 12 steps. I'm one of them. But it's like everything is happening right now. So how could I plan to do the 12 steps in the future and then get a change in the future? I can't really get a hold of this, but I see the change in people. You understand how I mean?
Yes. So you want me to comment on that?
Yes, please.
Okay. I know a lot about the 12-step approach because I've worked through some of those steps with people as their therapist. A lot of people in 12-step like to do some of the steps with the therapist. People. So I'm really fully aware of the process. It's a form of medicine. If you have a certain illness and there's a medicine that will help cure that, by all means, take the medicine. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with medicine, far from it. But the medicine may not be good for you forever. It may be something you take for a while and then you don't need it after a while. And I think these attitude toward the 12-step pro and con argument is a bootless argument. It doesn't mean anything. If somebody's drinking to excess and they get scared enough and they go to AA and they get a sponsor and all that, probably it will be a great help. I fully believe in that. But it's a medicine. You don't want to make a belief out of it, because when you do that, you sell yourself short. Does that address the question?
Yeah, I think so. And because I'm in right now, it's like I have had a lot of fantasies about a God that would do something for me in the future, and I'll do like this. But I come to realize that all we have is right here and right now. And and I read a lot about from Ramana Maharshi, and I also emailed you before, and we have written a bit about Ramana, and also when he talks about the question, who am I? He repeats that you should ask yourself, who am I? Great. I just want to finish with one question, Robert. Ramana he says a lot that you should ask yourself, who am I? What's your take on that?
What's my take on
asking myself, who am I, as Ramana says?
Yeah, if you have a brain in your head, I don't see how you can avoid asking yourself that. I don't know if you have to really be encouraged to do so. I mean, if you have that interest, that's the question. It's going to eventually come down to, what the fuck is this?
Yeah.
What's going on here? How did I get in this mess? Or whatever, if you have a dark take on it, you'd say, how did I end up broiling away in this lobster pot here? Or if you're more sanguine, you can say, well, this is kind of an okay party, but what's the point? Or whatever it is. I mean, if you understand this question, the problem with Ramana Maharshi, I'm sure he was a great guy and all, and we may have agreed on many things. I don't really know everything that he ever said. I think he said different things at different times, like most of us. But I don't know if there's answers to questions like that. I think that's the question that we always live with. What's the point? What is this? Why am I repeating? Okay, I've got to scrub out the pot again and do the dishes and everything, get up tomorrow and do it again. Why? Why? What do you hope to gain? See, I think that's a good question. I don't like these Indian gurus all that much because they filled in the answer for you, like in the back of the book, or the teacher's book had the answers in the back. That's what they do. I think it'd be better to just leave the question to you. The question is, who am I? And those guys did not have the answers. Those guys did not have the answer. The thing that made them great was they knew there was really a question. They weren't afraid to say that. They would discuss that with people in a deep way. So they were great that way. But they left a hypnotic trail of so-called teachers behind them who went to California, of course. Well, that's where the money is. They went to California and they set up shop, and that's what current spirituality is really centered on, that quite a bit, on that whole phenomenon of these, now baby boomers or whatever they are, got religion from India. So it's another rant. I don't know how I got onto it. So what was the question?
No, it was the question. Thank you, Robert, so much.
Oh, Goran, it's a pleasure. Thank you for being there. Is there someone else? I think there was a hand up person. No?
Yeah, I have a question, Robert.
Go ahead, please.
At the beginning of the meeting, you were talking about how we're hypnotized by our beliefs and also by language. So how do we step out of that state of hypnosis?
That's the question.
Yes.
There is no how. When you see that, that's the beginning of really seeing the hypnotic trance. You need to see the trance in order to get out of it. You have to see, wow, I was living in this world of ideas, as if that world of ideas was really this aliveness. I've mistaken a description for something that's indescribable, gotten them confused. And now I'm living for the thing that can be described in words, and the aliveness, I'm missing out on it. So naturally, I'm going to feel stifled or starved on some level because I'm not in touch with my actual aliveness in this moment. I'm living in a world of ideas. And see, what I'm doing here is I'm destroying those ideas. Not for you, I'm destroying them for myself. If someone asks me, what about Christianity? I'm going to beat it up for a while because it needs it, in my mind. Whether the effect that might have on someone else could be positive or negative or anything in between, and I can't control that. All I can do is speak from this perspective that I call awake. And you ask me how. And there isn't a how. You're awake now. It's just that you want it to be something that it isn't. You want it to be somehow gratifying or less painful or whatever the fantasy is than how you imagine you are now in the sleep state. This is it. What you are now is awake. In the next moment, there'll be a different awake, and it'll be you then. And it just goes on that way. When we imagine that there's this other thing that I'm not, but it's out there, I have to discover how to be that. You make it impossible because what you have to be is what you are now, not some fantasy of the future. You have to actually inhabit this human presence.
But that's too simple.
In its aliveness, you have to. It's not really simple. I have to disagree with you there, David. This is not a simple matter. I would never say that. When I look into the sensitivity of the human's mind, the human spirit, whatever you call it, it's quite complex. It's not easily satisfied. People who are intelligent are not easily satisfied. It's not that simple. Can't just, someone might imagine that some few words would have the key, but it's really hard to say that. I mean, I don't, just let me finish the idea. I wrote a book and people have praised the book and said it made them capsize their boat and all that. So I'm not saying that words are valueless, except when I look at the book, I don't know what set of words in there made someone feel that way. I can't really decipher it. It's not like that. People are looking for something very deep. And I don't have those answers. I just have my perspective. I could discuss that. But I don't think that seeing this situation is necessarily very simple. I can't say that. I think this thing that you got from John Troy's book is simple, that all we have is now. That's simple. But once you know that, you have to cope with now. And that's not always so simple. I understand your point of view. There is a level on which that may be true. But I'm preferring, in dealing with the questions that we that are in the book and that those of us who are still here are dealing with, I prefer to take a more practical human-animal view of it, not so philosophical, because I've observed that it really does come down to that. It comes down to feeling comfortable in your own skin somehow as a human. And I don't know how simple that is. I was a therapist for many years, and it wasn't often simple. It usually, if the snake had to do a lot of writhing around in order to get the old skin off. It just didn't fall off. And that's what therapists do. They help a new self to come out of the wreckage of the past. So anyway, I'm trying to keep this on a practical level. I understand the philosophical lures and fascinations, but what I'm trying to do on this Zoom thing is discuss the book. And the idea in the book is not philosophical. It really isn't. The whole flow of that book is to get you back into this aliveness and away from spirituality entirely. Just swear off it, forget it. Don't awaken, don't do any of that stuff. Just inhabit your human being fully. And then if something needs to be added, it could be done in the same way. A non-hypnotic, something's still missing. And then maybe you want to go to church. I mean, seriously, but then you would do it. We had discussed this earlier a bit. If you're that kind of Christian and you go to church because you like the fellowship and you understand God in the way that you understand it, you're not just drinking the Kool-Aid. That's a cool kind of thing. You might just go there because you like church. Maybe you like hymns. Maybe you like hugging people after the service. I don't know, but whatever it is, it's cool. That's not the thing. See, the thing is to actually be here. Whatever you do, that's what I don't think that's simple. That's why I'm showing up here to discuss this, because I think these questions that people have brought up today are very real. Very real. This thing about the school shooting is very, very real to me. Really real. And I felt very sad because there's probably no fix for it. And yet, when I hear these kids at the school who are so dedicated, I say, Robert, maybe you're just too old to catch the vibe here. These guys might really be onto something. I really hope they are. I hope they could really make a change in that. Get this assault weapons away from people. Just take that away. You need a rifle or a handgun, okay, you have it in your house. If you kill someone, you'll kill one or two people with that, and that'll be it. This other thing where you go to war, they got smoke bombs and all this shit, it's too crazy. Just too crazy. So, see, then someone could make this argument, well, Robert, why do you talk that way? It's all just imaginary anyway. Don't you understand the real self can't be wounded? Or, whatever the rap is. And they'll actually say that as if there's some profundity to it. And that's the part that really gets me. That they say it, I can dig that, but they say it with this air of self-satisfaction, as if pronouncing those words made it just fine. And it actually, frankly, seems insane. That's why when I talk about the Christians or something, it could come off sounding harsh, because I see that behavior is there. That's what got Trump elected.
That's scary right there.
Well, so I've lapsed into the worst side of politics, a place I almost never go, but somehow this meeting has led down the garden path. It's John, You're still there. I thought you disappeared. Yeah, great. Because it's always such a pleasure to see you. We're signing off here, so I just want to express my gratitude to you for everything.
Yeah, I would just like to say that what a treasure that I find your work is, and it is really no different than work of people like Ramana Maharshi, except that Ramana Maharshi had a different language and a different vocabulary and a different circumstance that he emerged in. And I appreciate the clarity and the no escape hatch that that you deal with really straight up without beating around the bush. And mortality is the biggie. And when you accept mortality, that's without any escape hatch.